Chapter 32, Cognitive Dissonance. Jeff was still in his study, on his third glass of whiskey, when there was a quiet knock at the door. He saved his work and closed the window. Then, with his glass in hand, he got up to unlock the door. Michael, Gavin, Jeremy, and Jack were standing in the doorway. Michael tilted his head towards him. "We need to talk about Ryan." Jeff sighed and drained the remainder of his glass. "Fucking yeah, we need to talk about Ryan." Ryan had passed out in his bedroom. Given he hadn't slept in days, it was likely going to be a 14-hour stint as it was, but Michael had slipped some sedatives into his dinner to help along the process. He reasoned it was for his own good. Jeff motioned for them to come in and went back to his chair on the other side of the desk. Jack and Michael sat down in the chairs opposite. Jeremy stood behind them, and Gavin perched on the edge of Jeff's desk after closing the door behind him. Even though Ryan wasn't likely to wake anytime soon, they kept their voices low. "We really should be talking to Ryan," Jack began, already feeling guilty about sneaking around behind his back. "Fucking good luck trying to talk to him," Michael muttered under his breath, still quietly frustrated by their interaction from earlier that day. "No, we need to talk about what's going on first, make sure we're all on the same page. Then we can talk to Ryan." Jeff looked around and they all stared back uncertainly, looking to him for leadership, which reminded him, "Michael, make sure Lindsay gets the memo. This is as much her problem as it is ours." There was a collective cringe at the way Jeff had phrased it as a problem. Even Jeff realized it. "Look, I didn't mean it like that." He didn't need to explain. They understood, but it still felt wrong, conspiratorial, especially after realizing what had been going through Ryan's head. "I've been looking over the streams," Jeff began again, subconsciously wincing already. "Shadles was playing some pretty A-level games to try to fuck with Ryan's head. Ryan's good, but there's stuff we didn't see. You guys didn't see what he was like in the shed, either. It was definitely personal. But whether it was something Shadles said to him or something he already had in his head when he went in there, and I hate to say it, but I'm inclined to think it's the latter, Ryan didn't think he'd be getting out of that warehouse alive." 4 worried faces stared back at him. Jeff sighed, his shoulders slumped in defeat. "He didn't think we'd go back for him. Or he didn't want us to." They were all momentarily caught up in reflection. There had never been any doubt in their minds they would go back for him. They would have done the same for any of them. Michael was unusually quiet, staring at the ground. It hadn't gone unnoticed by Jeff. "Michael, you got something to add? How is he dealing with the editing?" Michael shook his head, recalling the intensity in his voice when he told him to get out. "You're right," he started softly. "He didn't think we'd go back for him. Not after what happened with little Jay." Michael's eyes darted between Jeremy and Jeff. "I tried to tell him. We're all fucking hypocrites. There's not one of us who wouldn't sacrifice themselves for the rest of the crew, but then the second one person tries to actually do it, we immediately tear him a new one. It's because we care." He shook his head, but it was like he was having a whole different conversation. Michael frowned, the briefest flash of anger crossing his face. "Gavin, I think you should steer clear of Ryan for a while," he suggested quietly. Gavin looked up at him, confusion and concern written on his face. "Why, Michael?" Michael felt guilty for suggesting it, but he had to go with his gut on this one. "I'm worried. I'm scared he might hurt you. Not even on purpose, just, I don't know. Things got weird." "What?" Gavin snorted. "Don't be ridiculous. I'm not afraid of Ryan, Michael. I mean, I used to be, but not anymore," he explained simply. "He used to be the big scary vagabond, but now it's just like, oh, it's just Ryan. And even when he's doing bad things, under all that, he's still Ryan." Everyone in the room felt it, the pang of guilt at the way Gavin declared it so simply and innocently, like there was never any doubt about it. He's still Ryan. He was still Ryan when they accused him of being a traitor, too. Under the mask and paint and sarcastic grin, it was still Ryan. "But Ryan's still dangerous, Gavin," Michael pressed, the guilt not quite displacing the feeling of unease he got from Ryan earlier. "You know that. He's hurt you before. Please, just be careful around him, okay? For me?" Gavin nodded, but he looked a little wounded, pouting at the thought. "He wouldn't mean to, though. Not on purpose. Not to us. Jack tried to keep the conversation going. It was like pulling teeth getting everyone to discuss these issues, and if they wandered too far off topic, they'd never get to what was really important. Look, it's clear that Ryan's dealing with a lot of shit, and in our line of work, it's not like we can exactly just get help. So we have to just be as supportive and patient as we can. Give him space, keep him busy with things that aren't going to remind him of what happened. We'll get Lindsay on it. She'll have something for him, Jeff suggested hopefully. I don't think we should let him get involved with tracking down Shadles or the randoms yet either, Jeremy added. Jeff nodded thoughtfully. Nah, you and Gavin stick with it though. We need to stay on top of that. Jeremy and Gavin nodded together. How are you going with Shadles? Jeremy's eyes brightened. We might have a lead. Too early to tell. There's not much to go off. Looks like our guy's got his name on some documents the LSPD don't want getting out. So, getting the info is a bit tricky. We'll sort something out, Gavin added hopefully. All right, don't let Ryan know until we have something solid or until his contact gets back to him. Jeff rubbed his face with one hand. In the meantime, we do whatever we can for Ryan. Fucked if I know what that is. Let's just hope we figure it out. Over the next few days, Ryan slowly regained the use of his legs with the support of the crutches Lindsay had gotten, in all likelihood stolen, for him. He'd been recovering physically. His wounds were healing up nicely. All the swelling and bruising had gone down significantly. He was down to over-the-counter pain medication, and he'd taken out many of his stitches, some of them somewhat prematurely, which Lindsay had yelled at him for on one of her visits to check up on them. Lindsay had also been changing the dressing on the band. He never asked how it was, and she never told him. She cleaned it, put whatever medications or creams she had on it, and covered it with a fresh bandage. He didn't know if the others knew, if they'd asked, what Lindsay had said to them, if anything. Surely she'd discussed it with Jeff. He didn't want to dwell on it. It didn't matter. Things were healing. He'd even started sleeping again. Sort of. Jack may have surreptitiously mixed some sedatives into his food on a few occasions. All things considered, he seemed to be doing better. Mentally, however, he was just barely managing to hold it together. He'd finished all the editing Jeff wanted him to do, even gone the extra mile to give it a bit of flair. Jeff was right. They needed to send a message. They couldn't risk having something like this happen again. It actually had helped at some level. It reminded him how competent the crew were even without him. That gave him some hope. But once the editing was done, he'd found himself aimlessly floating about again. Jeff and Lindsay expressly forbade him from digging into Shadles. They were clearly worried about his mental state, but they wrote it off as having assigned the job to Jeremy and Gavin. Technically, Lindsay reminded him he was supposed to be on leave. Technically, he replied with a smirk that belied the truth in his words. I'm going to go stir-crazy. She'd laughed it off. He couldn't blame her, but he wasn't entirely kidding. In the last few days, the once welcomed space the crew had given him had given way to what just felt like pity. Ryan could practically feel it burning into him in the sorrowful glances he caught when they thought he wasn't looking. Maybe Jeff or Lindsay had finally said something to them. Maybe it was something else. Whatever it was, eventually, he couldn't take it anymore. Jeff and Lindsay had left early in the morning to represent the fakes at yet another secretive meeting, and Jeremy and Gavin hadn't heard anything from the randoms worth following up, so everyone was hanging out in the living room when Ryan came in. Their chatter immediately ceased, even though it probably didn't have anything to do with him to begin with. He grabbed a Diet Coke from the fridge, negotiated his way with one crutch to the couch, and flopped down on it, eyeing the others suspiciously. All right, I'm getting sick of this, he finally announced. You're all walking around on eggshells, and I'm going to need you to stop it, for the sake of my sanity. Please. He said it with the same smirk he'd been wearing thin for days. They could start to see the pain beneath it. I understand if you can't or don't want to be around me for whatever reason. That's fine. I can deal with that. What I can't deal with is the way you're all pretending not to have your own issues for my sake. Everyone stopped in their tracks. They hadn't considered it like that before, but he had a point. Just for now, can we just play some video games and talk about nonsense for a few hours? You know, pretend to be normal. This time his grin was pleading, hopeful but authentic. Jack smiled warmly. All right, what do you want to play? Anything where I can murder Gavin, he replied without hesitation, and a genuine smile on his face now. Gavin, you get the dubious honor of being my virtual stress ball for today. A chill ran down Michael's spine. Aw, why me, Ryan? Gavin whined exaggeratedly. I mean, it doesn't have to be you, but there's just something so satisfying about killing you in video games. There was nothing dark about the way he said it. It was meant totally innocently, but Michael couldn't shake the feeling of unease. I understand that feeling, Ryan, Jeremy said, nodding. Sorry, Gavin. Jack nodded too. Yeah, he has a point. Right? Ryan's eyes lit up at the banter. He's just so squishy. And he runs. Makes it fun. Squishy? Gavin squawked. Don't worry, my boy. I got you. Michael finally snapped himself out of it and jumped to Gavin's defense, reminding himself of Gavin's words. It's still Ryan. You are pretty fun to kill, though. No! Help me, Michael! Gavin giggled. I'll help you, Ryan, Jeremy declared. Battle buddies versus Team Nice Dynamite. We got this. Oh, you're fucked, Ryan chuckled. Jack watched and provided commentary, only really serving to rile everyone up further. It was oddly therapeutic to talk about heavy things so lightly. The way they could so casually throw around the idea of killing characters in video games when it was a fact of reality for them was something most people would consider morbid. For them, it was a coping strategy, and really, just a way to wind down and have fun. It was good to start to feel normal again. Ryan? A firm hand on his shoulder pulled him back to reality with a start. Jeremy sat on the edge of the bed, wrapped in his own bedsheet, looking worried. Ryan was laughing again. It was that same hysterical laughter that he couldn't stop, even though he had no idea what was so funny. He smothered his face with his pillow to muffle the sound until he regained control. When he picked up the pillow, Jeremy noted the knife wedged into the space between the headboard and the mattress. It was his. They always used to joke that Ryan slept with a gun under his pillow, but he would always retort something along the lines of, "That's an accident waiting to happen." He wasn't sure if he'd always done it, or if it helped keep his mind at ease after what he'd been through. But he wasn't going to question it. Not now, anyway. Ryan looked sheepish. Again? Jeremy nodded. It wasn't so bad this time. Sorry. Jeremy shook his head. There's nothing you can do about it. Don't worry. Just like the first time, it only took a few moments before Ryan fell straight back to sleep. Jeremy wasn't getting back to sleep anytime soon. He figured it was best to keep an eye on Ryan in case it happened again. Maybe if he could wake him up quickly enough, he'd remember why he was screaming. He wasn't sure if that was a good or bad thing. He fetched his laptop and went back to Ryan's room, making himself comfortable in the chair beside his bed and diving back into his research, trying to dig up anything he could on the seemingly disappeared Shane Dowell. Ryan woke early. He'd slept fitfully the remainder of the night, but he hadn't woken properly until the sun had risen. Jeremy's quiet snoring startled him. He had fallen asleep in the chair next to his bed, his laptop open on the table next to him. Ryan didn't want to disturb him, but he also wanted to know what was going on, and getting up was going to be too much commotion. He reached over to take the laptop to see what Jeremy had been doing. Probably reading those awful fanfiction stories again, he thought with a slight grin. It was a news report. The Los Santos Police Department released a statement today, formally identifying the body of a man whose remains were found in the trunk of a burned-out vehicle in the Paleto Bay area last week. Dental records were used to identify the man as 32-year-old former police detective Shane Dowell. The exact cause of death is yet to be determined, but is being treated as a homicide in connection with local gang activity. Police are appealing to witnesses to come forward with any information. Ryan's eyes skimmed over the article again. Shane Dowell. Shadles. Creative. He finally had a name. If the police knew, why hadn't Adam Ellis gotten back to him? A quick search of the name and the date of the Maze Bank incident immediately pulled up an article. The link had already been clicked. Amongst the injured, Detective Dowell suffered a gunshot injury. Intensive care. He immediately went digging for follow-up records, but they were heavily censored. Jeremy had obviously done the same. All the links he clicked were in his recently visited pages. He must have come across it before he fell asleep. Maybe that was why he was in here. He wanted to show him. When he woke up. Something in Ryan pressed him, urged him to look deeper. He should just wait till Jeremy woke up. He should just ask him, get an explanation for what was going on. There had to be a logical explanation. Without realizing exactly what he was doing, Ryan checked Jeremy's search history. It indicated he'd looked up the article days earlier, before the police report was released. Why was this the first he was hearing about it? They still don't trust you, you know. Shadow's voice in his head mocked. No, Jeremy knew how important this was. Why the fuck was he holding out on him? He squeezed his eyes shut and his hands clenched into fists as he tried to calm his breathing. Suddenly, he was back in the shed with Shadles. Shane, knife slicing easily through the webbing of his fingers, popping the tendons from bone, the satisfying crunching of cartilage in the knuckles, and the blood flowing over his own hands, warm and wet and sticky. He looked down, but it wasn't Michael's knife slicing through Shane's hands. It was Jeff's knife, deep in Jeff's gut, his own hand white-knuckled on the hilt as the blood pulsed out in spurts. He gave a moment's thought that he may have severed the hepatic artery. He looked up into Jeff's face, becoming progressively paler, mouth gaping, incredulous, gray eyes pained and disbelieving and disappointed, that of a father whose son just swore at him for the first time. I didn't mean to. He could feel the blood, warm and wet and sticky on his hands. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. The sound of his own voice snapped him out of it. He was babbling, aloud. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean. Jeremy's eyes were wide, his mouth open, gasping, disbelieving. Jeremy. No. His knife. Not his knife. Jeremy's knife. The knife Jeremy had given him so he felt better about losing his own. The knife he now kept in his bed in place of his own was in his hand, and the blade was nestled in the space between Jeremy's left lower ribs. And the blood. So much blood. Jeremy gasped. The color was rapidly draining from his face. Ryan? No. No, 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 no. Jeremy! What had he done? There was no more mask to hide behind, and nothing left to mark the boundaries between Ryan and what he feared he'd become. This wasn't the vagabond's doing. This was Ryan's. The realization of what he'd done hit him like a truck. He had trouble remembering what happened next. It all felt surreal, like it was happening in a distance. He called Lindsay, somehow managed to explain himself in a coherent manner, and she organized something. Then everyone was in the room. Hands were everywhere, pushing him, holding him back. Voices quiet at first, then louder, shouting at him. Ryan, what have you done? It wasn't me. Jeremy, stay with me, buddy. I didn't do it. Let go of him, Ryan. I didn't. Get off him! Someone hit him. He didn't know who or why. He didn't fight back. Suddenly he felt cold, alone. And then he remembered nothing. Silence. For the longest time he just stared at his hands, covered in blood, cooling and congealing. Jeremy's blood. At some level, he was functioning enough to realize that the buzzing noise he could hear was his phone. He picked it up, but couldn't remember the right words to make it work. Luckily, he didn't need to. The voice on the phone was calm and collected and reassuring. Ryan, are you there? There was a pause. If you can hear me, Jeremy's okay. He's gonna be okay. There was another long pause. No one blames you. We'll be back soon, okay? He couldn't find the words to reply, instead just putting the phone down on the table next to him. After a few minutes it buzzed again, and he received more or less the same message in text form. He read it over a few times to make sure it stayed in his mind. Jeremy's okay. No one blames you. He ran a shaking hand through his hair, leaving sticky streaks of red behind, and pulled himself out of bed. He hadn't taken any painkillers today. The pain was bad, but he worked through it. The word penance briefly came to mind, but it was so fleeting he couldn't settle on it. His mind was already crowded with other conflicting words competing for attention. One way or another. Ryan, what have you done? Jeremy's okay. No one blames you. You will be their downfall. He got dressed and hobbled on crutches to the living room. where there was a letter waiting for him on the kitchen counter. He ripped it open. Vagabond. Thanks to your contribution, we got an ID. Check the news. See enclosed. The usual deal. You keep your job, I keep mine. Gilby. Adam had included what looked like a highly confidential police report. Ryan's eyes skimmed over it, only half registering. Shadle's words immediately sprung to mind. I don't think you and I are so different. His hands left faint burgundy fingerprints on the paper. Jeremy's blood. Ryan felt a shiver run down his spine. It takes a monster to destroy a monster. He folded up the notes and shoved them in his back pocket before heading for the garage. When the others got back, Ryan was gone.